Hello guys, welcome to the channel Doc Talks. Today we are going to discuss gastrointestinal system, basic and advanced points and vast diagrammatic representations. Mouth. Tongue has bony attachments and is attached to the floor of mouth by frenulum. The bony attachments are styloid process, hyoid bone. Posterior exit from mouth guarded by a ring of palatine or lingual tonsils. Ducted salivary glands open at various points in the mouth. This process involves teeth and tongue. Muscles of mastication moves the jaws. Salivary amylase does hydrolysis of starch and glycogen into the maltose. Esophagus. Esophagus is about 10 inches long. Food moves through esophagus by peristalsis. Cadioesophageal sphincter guarding entrance from esophagus. Pyloric sphincter guarding the outlet is much better defined. Fundus, body, and pylorus recognized as distinct regions. Stomach secretes both acid and mucus for self-protection. Surface area is increased by rugae, which serves as temporary store for food. Digestion of carbohydrates in small intestine. Digestion by pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic secretions, like saliva, contains a large quantity of alpha amylase, that is, almost identical in its function with alpha amylase of saliva, but is several times as powerful. Therefore, within 15 to 30 minutes after the chyme empties from the stomach into the duodenum and mixes with pancreatic juice, virtually all carbohydrates will have become digested. In general, carbohydrates are almost totally converted into maltose and other small glucose polymers before passing beyond the duodenum or upper jejunum. Digestion of proteins. Proteins of the diet, the dietary proteins, are chemically long chains of amino acids bound together by peptide linkages. A typical linkage is as shown with the peptide bond, and the figures you can see clearly represent the digestion of carbohydrates. So here I am presenting some figures. The figures show typical function of glandular cell for formation and secretion of enzymes and other secretory substances. The other shows formation and secretion of saliva by a submandibular salivary glands. The primary secretions are petilin, mucus, extracellular fluid. Oxyntic gland from the body of the stomach is also presented here. Schematic anatomy of canaliculi in a parietal cell is also shown. Parasympathetic nervous regulation of salivary secretion is also presented here for your better understanding. Gastric acid secretion mechanism. In the parietal cells, carbon dioxide and water are converted into hydronium ion and bicarbonate ion, catalyzed by enzyme carbonic anhydrase. The parietal cells secrete HCl into the lumen of stomach and concurrently absorb bicarbonates into the bloodstream. Gastrointestinal system and gastric acid stimulations. Gastric acid production is stimulated by three mechanisms. Vagal stimulation. Vagal nerves innervates parietal cell and stimulate H+ secretion directly. Histamine release. Histamine is released from mast cells in the gastric mucosa and diffuses to nearby parietal cells. Gastrin. It is released in response to eating a meal, especially protein, thus stimulates parietal cells to secrete H+. Gastric emptying time, the caudate region of stomach contract to propel food into the duodenum. The caudate region is the tail region, which is towards the intestine. The rate of gastric emptying time is fastest if gastric content is isotonic. Fat inhibits gastric emptying time, that is, it increases gastric emptying time. Stomach to pyloric sphincter to duodenum to jejunum to ileum. Stomach gastric transit time. What is it? The time required for ingested food to pass through the GI tract. Shorter the transit time is seen in conditions associated with gut hypermotility, such as diarrhea. Delayed passage from any cause results in a longer transit time. The figure shows absorption of sodium chloride, glucose, and amino acids through the intestinal epithelium. Mechanism for secretion of hydrochloric acid is shown for your better understanding. Regulatory peptide secretions in the digestive tract. Cell secretion from the stomach. ECL cells, enterochromaffin cells. They secrete histamine, which functions as it acts on H2 receptor on parietal cells. It increases gastric acid secretion, increase potentiating effect of acetylcholine and gastrin. G cells, these secrete gastrin that increases gastric acid secretion and motility. Somatostatin, which is pro-insulin as well as anti-insulin. It is synthesized by D cells in pylorus, duodenum, delta cells in pancreas, hypothalamic neurons, which D cells in pylorus decrease gastric acid secretion. Delta cell in pancreas suppress the insulin and glucagon secretion. Hypothalamic neurons secrete GHIH. Cells in small intestine, duodenum. S cells secrete secretin, which maintains alkaline pH in duodenum, constricts the pyloric sphincter, causes secretion of bicarbonate-rich pancreatic juice. I cells secrete CCK, decrease gastric motility, increase intestinal motility, causes enzyme-rich pancreatic juice to be secreted. Bile flow from gallbladder. MO cells secrete mutilin, which increase MMC contraction. Bile acids emulsify lipids in the small intestine and increase surface for digestion. Pancreatic lipases hydrolyze lipids to fatty acids, monoglycerides, cholesterol, and lysolecithin. Lipid absorption disorders. Malabsorption of lipids, thus causing fatty stools. This is also referred as steatorrhea. Steatorrhea can be caused by pancreatic diseases such as pancreatitis and cystic fibrosis. Hypersecretion of gastrin is the other reason. Ileal resection and bacterial overgrowth. Trypsin and chymotrypsin are secreted by pancreas, which helps in digestion of proteins. Trypsin is secreted in the inactive form as trypsinogen and is converted to trypsin by enzyme enterokinase. Chymotrypsin is secreted in the inactive form as chymotrypsinogen and converted to chymotrypsin by trypsin. Nucleic acid absorption. Nuclease. Nucleic acid into nucleotide. Ribonuclease. It hydrolyzes RNA. Deoxyribonuclease. It hydrolyzes DNA. Absorption of water. It is isoosmotic in the small intestine and gallbladder. Bile secreted by liver. Gallbladder stores and concentrates bile, acidifies bile, add mucus to bile. Digestion and absorption, function of bile salts. Digestion of lipids, emulsification. Absorption of lipids, micelle formation for fat absorption. Ferring function, absorption of nutrients in stomach, alcohol absorbed. Duodenum. It absorbs divalent cations, ferrous, and calcium. Jejunum. All major nutrients are absorbed. Max water absorption 6.6 liter per day. Long chain fatty acids absorbed into lymphatic circulation. Appears milky called lacteals. Lymphatics in form of chylomicrons. Ileum. Magnesium, vitamin B12, bile salts are absorbed from ileum. Enterohepatic cycling occurs 7 to 8 times a day. Maternal antibodies are absorbed from ileum. Gut or colonic microflora synthesize and absorb vitamin B12, folic acid, vitamin K, short chain fatty acids. Figure shows regulation of pancreatic secretion. Acid from stomach releases secretin from wall of duodenum. Fats and amino acid cause release of cholecystokinin. There is a common bile duct seen there. Secretin and cholecystokinin absorbed into bloodstream. Vagal stimulation releases enzyme into acini. Secretin causes copious secretion of pancreatic fluid and bicarbonates. Cholecystokinin causes secretion of enzymes. Liver, gallbladder, and pancreas are represented there. The indicated parts are to be identified, so kindly identify it for your better understandings. Answers are given below. Figure shows liver secretion and gallbladder emptying. Secretin via bloodstream stimulates liver ductal secretion. Bile acids via blood stimulate parenchymal secretion. Vagal stimulation causes weak contraction of gallbladder. Bile is stored and concentrated up to 15 times in bladder. Cholecystokinin via bloodstream causes gallbladder contraction and relaxation of sphincter of Oddi. A figure showing formation of gallstones is represented. Causes of gallstones: too much absorption of water from bile, too much absorption of bile acids from bile, too much cholesterol in bile, inflammation of epithelium. Selected blood supply to the abdominal viscera. The descending abdominal aorta contains 3 unpaired branches. The celiac trunk supplies the stomach, part of pancreas, liver, and duodenum. The superior mesenteric artery supplies part of duodenum, jejunum, ileum, cecum, ascending colon, and transverse colon. The inferior mesenteric artery supplies the descending and sigmoid colon. Phases of gastric secretion and their regulation is shown. Cephalic phase via vagus. Parasympathetics excite pepsin and acid production. Gastric phase. Local nervous secretory reflexes, vagal reflexes, gastrointestinal stimulation, and the intestinal phase includes nervous mechanisms, hormonal mechanisms. Small intestine consists of duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, short form DJI. Have the highest surface area. Duodenum. It is the first part of small intestine, C-shaped, 10 inches long, and curves around the head of pancreas and the entry of common bile duct. Highest drug absorption in the body takes place here. Pancreas are a large glandular organ attached near the stomach. Pancreas secrete intestinal enzymes, pancreatic lipase, amylase, protease, and these helps in digestion of carbohydrates. Bile secretions are bile salts, bilirubin, phospholipids, and cholesterol. Jejunum. It is 8 to 10 feet long. The majority of food absorption takes place in the jejunum. Secretions. Secretin stimulates pancreas to produce watery fluid high in bicarbonate concentration. Pancreozymin stimulates pancreas to produce a viscous fluid low in bicarbonate concentration. Ileum. It is 12 feet long towards the end of small intestine. Accumulation of lymphoid tissue called Pierre patches are more common here. Innervations, enteric nervous system, branch of ANS, autonomic nervous system, also known as peripheral/mini brain. Submucous, mesenous plexus, which is sensory. Myenteric plexus, Auribax plexus, motor function. Neurotransmitters, excitatory neurotransmitters, acetylcholine substance P. Inhibitory neurotransmitters, VIP inhibits motility. NO. Electrical activity, pacemaker cells, intestinal cells of Cajal. Electric activity occurs at a frequency. Frequency differs at different parts of GIT. Figure shows crypt of Leberkuhn found in all parts of small intestine between the villi, which secretes almost pure extracellular fluid. Figures show emptying at the ileocecal valve. Pressure and chemical irritation relax sphincter and excite peristalsis. Fluidity of contents promotes emptying. Another figure shows absorptive and storage functions of the large intestine. Poor motility causes greater absorption, and hard feces in transverse colon cause constipation. Excess motility causes less absorption and diarrhea or loose feces. Large intestine, it is also known as colon. Jejunum terminates at cecum. Highest basic and pH. pH varies between 5.5 to 7. Animals digest cellulose in the colon. The large intestine reabsorbs water, then eliminates drier residues as feces. Colon consists of higher flora and fauna in the GI tract. 90 to 99% anaerobic bacteria are here. B. fragilis and C. difficile, anaerobic and aerobic E. coli. Colon bacterial produce vitamin K2, which is menaquinone, diseases of gastrointestinal systems, diseases of mouth and jaw. Oral thrush is caused by Candida albicans and moniliasis. Gingivitis, that is gum inflammation, or gingival hyperplasia, is caused by Fusobacterium species. Stomatitis is inflammation of mouth cavity. Herpes stomatitis, caused by herpes infection, and aphthous stomatitis, caused by oral hygiene or damage to mucous membrane. Mucositis, oral ulcers are known as canker sores or aphthous ulcers. Diseases of salivary glands. Sjogren syndrome, which is dry mouth and dry eyes, is an autoimmune disease. It is associated with rheumatoid arthritis. Sialorrhea is an excessive secretion of saliva in infants, children. Parkinson's disease can cause by mucosal irritation. Figures is represented. Identify the indicated parts of large intestine and take the help from below. Daily secretions of intestinal juices with the volume and pH are given below. The total daily volume of the intestinal secretions is 6700 ml. Now I am going to represent some figures with a double contrast radiograph of stomach and duodenum. Identify the parts and identify the parts of duodenum as well. Barium radiograph of large intestine and radiograph of jejunum and ileum is also represented further. Antiperistalsis naturally occurs in colon from hepatic flexure of colon to cecum. Frequency at sigmoid is 6 to 9 per minute, and in ascending colon it's 2 to 6 per minute. Significance of antiperistalsis is to reabsorb water. Maximum absorption of water takes place at jejunum, 6.6 liter per day as discussed earlier. Segmentation movements of small intestine are regularly spaced, as you can see, isolated, irregularly spaced, and weak regularly spaced. Dyspepsia, defined as pain or discomfort in the upper abdomen. Symptoms are nausea, fullness, early satiety, bloating, or regurgitation. The dyspepsia could be due to esophagitis, GIT, gastroesophageal reflux disease, peptic ulcer, 15 to 25%, reflux esophagitis, gastric or esophageal cancer. Figure showing peptic ulcer caused by H. pylori, that is Helicobacter pylori, is there. Causes are high acid and peptic content, irritation, poor blood supply, poor secretion of mucus, and infection of H. pylori. Diseases of esophagus are also listed here. Gastroesophageal reflux disease is reflux of gastric acid contents into the esophagus, which also refers to as heartburn or regurgitation. Extraesophageal symptoms include cough, laryngitis, asthmatic syndrome. But the common symptoms are heartburn, regurgitation of acid or bile, and hypersalivation. Peptic ulcers. Types of peptic ulcers: esophageal, gastric, duodenal. Gastric acid induced damage in stomach, surface mucus, decrease in bicarbonate secretion, decrease in mucosal blood flow, decrease in epithelial cell capacity. Aggravating factors for this are H. pylori, NSAIDs, ASA, aminosalicylic acid, cigarettes, alcohol, impaired regulation of acid pepsin secretion. Diseases of stomach are gastritis, that is inflammation of gastric or stomach lining, which is also caused by NSAIDs, cigarette smoking, heavy alcohol. Gastroenteritis, inflammation of entire GIT tract. Diseases of small intestine. Duodenal ulcers are mainly caused by Helicobacter pylori, and the second most common reason is medication like NSAIDs. Zollinger-Ellison syndrome is excessive secretion of HCl. Celiac disease is caused by sensitivity to gluten in cereals. This is due to inability of absorption of gluten. Digestion and absorption. Digestive enzymes are classified based on their target substrates on which they are acting. Proteases and peptidases. These split the proteins into smaller peptides and amino acids. As we know, proteins are made up of amino acids. Lipases split fat into 3 fatty acid molecules and a glycerol molecule. Carbohydrates. These split carbohydrates such as starch, sugars into simpler sugars such as glucose. Nucleases. These split nucleic acids into nucleotides. GI secretions include saliva, gastric secretions, pancreatic secretions, and bile. So amylase hydrolyzes starch and glycogen into maltose. There is amylase in saliva and in stomach. Maltase is acting on maltose, converting into 2 glucose molecules. Sucrase converts sucrose into glucose and fructose. Trihalase, it degrades carbohydrates to glucose. Glucosidase, breakdown of sucrose and starch to glucose. Acarbose, it inhibits alpha glucosidase. Lactase, it converts lactose, which is milk sugar, into glucose plus galactose. Pancreatic secretions are high carbonic acid concentration, isotonic, pancreatic lipase, amylase, and proteases. Disorders of carbohydrate absorption. Lactose intolerance results from the absence of brush border lactase. Thus, non-absorbed lactose causes osmotic diarrhea. Milk intolerance can result from 2 reasons, that is lactose intolerance and the milk protein allergies. And then let's discuss lipid absorption. It occurs in pancreas, lipase, small intestine. Lipase is released mainly from pancreas into the GI tract to help breakdown of fat. Orlistat, Xenical, these inhibit lipase. These are the drugs which inhibit lipase. last part is absorption of vitamins and nutrients. Fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, K are absorbed in the small intestine along with the other lipids. Vitamin B12 is absorbed in the ileum and that requires intrinsic factor for its absorption. Absorption of calcium mainly occurs in the small intestine, which is assisted by the active form of vitamin D3, 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol, which is produced in kidney. So these are required for absorption of calcium. Chronic renal failure or vitamin D deficiency results in inadequate intestinal calcium absorption, causing rickets in children and osteomalacia in adults. The mechanism of calcium absorption is passive absorption and active transport. Absorption of iron. It is absorbed as heme iron, that is iron bound to hemoglobin or myoglobin in muscles, or as free ferrocines. The iron absorbed from small intestine in the form of ferrous. Now transferrin. Free ferrous circulates and binds to transferrin, which transports it from small intestine to its storage sites, where liver, and from liver to bone marrow. Why? For the synthesis of hemoglobin. So innervations of GI tract, autonomic innervation, cholinergic. It is usually excitatory on functions of GI tract. It excites. It is carried via the vagus and pelvic nerves. Vagus nerve innervates the esophagus, stomach, pancreas, and upper large intestine. Pelvic nerve innervates the lower large intestinal part and rectum and anus. So this was it, guys. I think I have tried to list everything possible with the many vast diagrams for your practice. So thank you. I am listing many references from which I have taken this data. So thank you.